Hi, I'm Burke MacDonald with Schaumburg Heartbeat. We're over at Church of the Holy Spirit on Bodie Road in Schaumburg, Illinois. We're with Father George Kane. He's the original pastor of this parish. He's been out here for quite a number of years. I believe, George, you're 93 this year, right?
93. Right.
Going to be 94
in January.
Yeah. And we happen to be taping on Veterans Day. We'll come back to that in a little while, but I'd like to thank you for your service on this day with the veterans. And it's really an important day for the veterans, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
So let's start from the very beginning, as they say. And that's, where
My
did you...
beginning, or?
Yeah, your beginning. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in St. Hilary's Parish on the northwest side of Chicago, on Bryn Mawr in California. And I think we were there probably from the time I was 10 or 11, and all the way through the time I went through the seminary. And
you had a friend that's everybody in the city knows, right? George Hallis.
Right. Well, yes.
Now, was he a neighbor?
They lived across the street from us as we were growing up.
Is he basically, did you go to school with him and everything?
Yes, he was in the same grade at St. Hilary's, right.
Were you as athletic as he ended up being?
Not nearly.
Not nearly.
No. But he died rather young, so that was quite a long time.
Was he a character, as you recall?
Yes, he was. He was a very, very brilliant guy and a leader-type person. Yeah.
And that's what led him probably to eventually taking and running the Bears and his leadership abilities.
Well, it helped because his father owned it. So,
okay, well that would help a little bit. So you went to Quigley High School, right?
Went to Quigley High School.
How did you make that decision?
Well, and growing up, you're like all kids, like all Catholic kids, not all Catholic boys, but so many that thought about the possibility of going to Quigley. And I mentioned it to the sisters, the Benedictine sisters, for whom I have great affection and respect, and also the priests of the parish. So they sort of nurtured this along. And when I graduated from grammar school, then I just had decided, well, I'll give Quigley a shot. It's just a high school, and only a fraction of the boys who went there actually became priests. But it was a very good school.
Right.
And it was the kind of a place you like to be, even though it took an hour to get there, an hour to get home. But it's the kind of a place you like to be because the boys there they were bright and aggressive and fun, and there was no hazing or mocking. Everybody was treated with great respect.
Now, as your friends slowly decided to go on and do, I imagine a lot of them went out into the business world and the colleges and other things.
Well, yeah, but the war intervened with all that, so that they went to other schools. Some went to Loyola, some went to St. George, some went to public high school. But then by the time we finished high school, they were all 18, and most of them were then conscripted into the service, So, and then then I went to seminary when I was 18 in Mundelein, and then went there for 7 years. And then after that, of course, after ordination, we all went our different ways, yeah. But we kept friendship, so that we kept friendship with the guys in the neighborhood, more so even than the guys with whom I went to high school.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you were in the seminary, what's that experience like? Is there a lot of?
How long do we have to talk about it? I would say it's challenging. At that time, it's much different than it is now.
Right.
But at that time, the best way to be was compliant and observant. And sort of the kind of a people went along with the flow.
But that was the whole structure of the Catholic Church at that time, right?
Exactly, right, yeah. So that was the way that it was. That didn't exactly fit with my particular persona. But anyhow, I got through it.
So were you sort of a challenge to the teachers, or were you?
Well, I don't know, not by way of academics, but by way of perhaps of attitude, yes.
Oh, okay. And did that come to haunt you at times by the people in charge?
When I was there, oh yeah, oh sure, yeah. Yeah, but all things pass.
Thanks. Okay. Well, and we'll get into that because Vatican II came along and sort of changed the
Yes.
whole outlet of the church, right?
Well, it changed the outlook of many in the church, but it still has a way to go. But it did change, it changed me, certainly. And it reaffirmed a lot of the attitudes and understandings that I had developed just in the course of living.
And back at that time when that first happened, and it's, as you say, it's still going on to a certain extent.
Oh, yeah.
But it's got to be difficult working with, you see the ability to expand things and make things more open for people and more welcoming, right?
Well, that was the whole thrust of Vatican II. The thrust of Vatican II was to renew the community of faith so that it would have a deeper, more profound understanding of the movement that is Christianity, called to union with God through Christ. So this is the movement that they had, and then they had structures that connect with the various aspects of Christian life, with understanding what the church is, having a profound sense of the mission of the church in the modern world, the attitude of the Catholic tradition with other Christian churches who were not Catholic. It involved the whole spectrum of life. And the Vatican II then laid out kind of understandings that it invited us to listen, to understand, and then to connect. And that's the important thing, the connecting it with the structures within the church, whether we're speaking about bishops or speaking about a pastor of a local church. It's supposed to take the understandings that we had from Vatican II and then connect it with the structures of the individual parish. And it makes a great deal of difference.
But at that time, you still had the people that the structure was very compact and very black and white and pretty.
Well, that's what
so
they
how do you
said. Well, no, they leave you alone. I mean, they don't bother them, they don't bother you. So
Okay.
that as long as you're faithful and as long as things are going along, okay, they leave you alone. So no priest can use the excuse, well, I didn't want to do this because my bishop didn't tell me. What did the bishop know? He wasn't pastor of a parish.
Right.
So it's up to the individual unit of the parish with the people to figure out how they should express themselves in faith.
Now, when you left the seminary, not left the seminary, when you were ordained and went out into the Christian church or the Catholic church, you were assigned in a pretty needy parish, right?
Well, the first 2 years I was in a place called Holy Rosary, that's 113th in South Park. And that was basically a working class white parish.
Okay.
But then after 2.5 years, I had the opportunity to go to an inner city black parish that was very vibrant, very alive, Holy Cross, 65th in Maryland, right in the heart of Woodlawn. So I had a chance to go there, and that was exciting. I was with 2 other priests who were my own age, one of them a classmate and the other a class back of me. And the pastor was a wonderful man who understood Vatican II before it was Vatican II. So this was 1953. And he said, well, you 3 young guys, you run the parish, and then come to me if you have things that you want to talk about. But I'm comfortable with you guys running the parish. That was wonderful.
Well, and part, you mentioned it was a vibrant parish,
Oh,
so
yeah,
I'm assuming by that you mean that you had a lot of contact, the parishioners back and forth with understanding the church and trying to get them to learn things they needed to be aware of, and also for you to get the church active and get people involved.
Well, it was a two-way street because most of the people were not Roman Catholic. But we had a school, a great school run by the BVM sisters, and we had more than 500 children, boys and girls, in that school, and most of them were not Catholic. But we were able to attract the parents to the parish through the school. And as a consequence, we did build up a pretty vibrant parish of people who were worshiping with us on Sunday. And then we had an instruction class for the adults. So they were to come twice a week for a period of 13 weeks. And in that period of time, we helped open them to the understanding and life of the Catholic Church, you know. And many of them became Roman Catholics, many didn't. But we developed a community of people. And the sisters, on their part, were with the children, and they were wonderful. These sisters were great. And the kids got a good education, because the education in the public schools at that time, probably more so even than now, were very inferior. And so when they came to Holy Cross Parish and went to school at our place, they got the best of education.
When you're working with all these different people from different religious backgrounds, do you find there's more similarities and differences?
Oh, yes, surely. And as I say, there was interaction between us as they took these instructions, because our whole thing was almost all instruction. In the fall, we had instruction classes going in the morning, in the afternoon, and in the evening. And then in the other part of the year, we only had it in the evening. But there was a back and forth, so we learned from them even as they understood more profoundly what we were about. And so we were giving them the core Catholic understanding, and we didn't bring in a lot of the peripheral stuff that is insignificant. We went to the heart of things.
Is that what, I know eventually when you came out here at one point that you started an interfaith council among the different, the leaders of the different churches out here?
There was Carl Mencken was the pastor of the Presbyterian Church in Schaumburg, and he and I invited all the ministers of the area, including the priests, to become part of a group that would meet every week. And we would discuss the lessons that the readings that each of the communities had. And so it wasn't a question of arguing. We just were learning from one another, but just listening to one another, praying with one another. And eventually, we not only had the men who were the pastors, but we had women who were pastors as well. We had a couple of Methodists and a few Evangelical Lutheran Church in America Lutherans, you know. And we had Ray Dowd from our parish would come once in a while, and Sister Marilyn. But we were the only Catholics who were involved in it.
Do you think that helped strengthen all the churches in Schaumburg?
It helped, yeah, because we learned from one another again to respect, not just theoretically, but by being with one another. And then every year we had a retreat that we took part in, and we met every Tuesday morning from 7:30 to 9 in the basement of our rectory. And we had met there because we had Mass at 9 o'clock.
Okay.
So it was a wonderful human experience, because we did learn from one another and we became friends.
Did some of the parishes start doing things interactively from that?
That's a very good question, Burke, because one of the things that you realize is it's one thing to sit and talk and reflect and pray, but if a group is going to really continue over a long period of time, they have to do something. So we learned we didn't have enough to do, and that, and for other reasons that were not so important now. I'm not even sure how many years we met, but it was for quite a number of years that we met every week.
Now, there was a period of time between the parishes after you were in your first few assignments, and then you were an Army chaplain.
Air Force.
Air Force chaplain,
yeah,
okay.
From 59 to 63.
What was that experience like? That's got to be tough working with people that have, seen things that people really don't need to necessarily see or participate in.
Well, I wasn't in there in a time of war. I was in there at a time of peace. But it was not, it was like the first parish, the first assignment was in Robbins Air Force Base, and they didn't have a Catholic program. So I initiated the Catholic program. That was like starting a parish. So that was exciting.
Okay.
Because we got the people across all lines of division. And it was interesting to see, especially with the women who were mostly wives of the officers and men, how well they interacted without regard for rank or position, you know. And then we had a number of men who took an active role in getting the parish started. And we had a religious education program for kids that started. It was just another parish.
But then you went over for a while. You were in Korea,
Well,
right?
then I was in Korea for a year, yeah. And that was a time of peace. It was a time when Korea was still very poor, I mean, extremely poor. And so when in Seoul, Korea, they had street lights, you know, like on a string. That was how undeveloped they were at that particular time. But that was interesting because, once again, I was interacting greatly with, especially with the Protestant chaplain, and he and I became very good friends. And then he was the one that had a lot of Protestant ministers, Koreans, and with whom he was friends, and so we would be invited, and I through him, we would be invited to dinners with them. And even though we couldn't speak the language and only a few of them could speak English, those were kind of good experiences just being with one another. So, and that was a very interesting time because it was you saw again how difficult it is for men, especially without their families, to be part of the Christian community. It was difficult, and we only had a fraction, both of Catholics or Protestants, who responded. So in that way, it was you just would do what you could, go around, visit the men on at their workstations. I would go to the fly into places around the China Sea, where we would have stations set up, you know, with radar, you know. And I'd stay there for a few days with the men, talk things over, preside at Eucharist with them, and then fly back. And that was quite interesting because you got a chance to listen and talk with these young guys, and they were glad to see anybody come and visit them, you know.
And then you were back in the States, but still in the military, working with, just before Vietnam started, and
well,
people
I was working
going
with the Air Commandos from 1961 to 63, in the middle of 63, at the end of 61 to 63. And yeah, they were all volunteers, they're Air Commandos, and they were ostensibly, observers, but really they were combat pilots. And so that was difficult in many ways for them. Many of them died. Many of them were killed. And so our base was a small base right on the Gulf, and it was part of a larger base that was inland. But all our men were engaged in preparing to go to Vietnam.
So now with that going on, are you working with families too to deal with these issues?
Yes. Oh yeah, mostly working with families, sure.
And that's got to be tough with knowing that the head of the household's going to be going on and possibly not coming back.
Yeah, it has its. You don't think so much of how difficult it was for me. I was thinking how difficult it was for them.
Right.
Because so that it was very, very hard. Every 2 weeks we would have a command performance, and we would have men leaving for Korea, or rather leaving for Vietnam. You know, and it was a command performance where all the support people, doctors, lawyers, chaplains, cooks, everybody had to be there to set them off. It was a big thing. It was not a small thing.
Okay, we're gonna move now and talk about you starting the parish. And when you first came out here, there were two other parishes here, right? There was St. Hubert's and St. Marcelline's.
St. Hubert's and Marcelline's, right. Yeah.
Okay, now it's got to be difficult. There's people already going to these parishes. They're sort of connected. St. Hubert's had a school at that time, so there were people with children in their school. St. Marcelline's, I don't think, had a school, but how do you go about encouraging people to join a new group when there's already existing groups out here?
That's a good question. So what happened, I was invited by the pastor of St. Hubert's and also the pastor of St. Marcelline's to come on a Sunday and preach at all the masses and tell them about the new parish that was being formed in this particular area. And I gave them the boundaries, and then asked that we were going to have a meeting. I forget what date exactly, but it was in the basement of St. Hubert's, and invited them all to come. So we realized that it was going to be difficult, especially for people who had children in the grammar school at St. Hubert's, but we made an arrangement with them to make it easier for them to have the children go to St. Hubert's and yet the adults and the family be part of our new parish. So some people did that and some people just stayed with St. Hubert's, and that was okay too.
Now, right before you came here, you were working in the seminary, and you took advantage of that, it's my understanding.
Well, yeah, what happened is that the last year I was there were a group of seminarians who just began. Amongst them is Father John Hoffman way back when, and a few others. And for somehow they got connected with me, and we started talking about pastoral ministry and what does it mean to be a priest in a parish? How do you set priorities? How about forming staff? A lot of different things. And then when I knew that I was going to, with the people, start this new parish, talk to the seminarians about it. And so they got enthused. And eventually when the parish was started, they came with me. So they came with me, and they were a good part of it because they were with me in the initial meeting at St. Hubert's when we talked to the people, and then many of them stayed as the parish started to develop and did many different things in the parish.
Now, we also have Father John Hoffman with us, who is you're a retired priest also, but are out here helping out with the parish again in your retirement, and we appreciate that. But what was it like with this guy saying, hey, we got to do this, and you're just a young seminarian trying to figure out what's going on in the world? What was that whole experience like?
Just say yes. It was very exciting, and the seminary, this was the practical aspects of ministry, pastoral ministry, learning how to be a priest in a parish, and being able to connect with the families, meet with them, and ostensibly we were introducing and directing programs, but I believe we all found that we were learning a lot more from them about what church was supposed to be and how to make church alive among people's lives, in their homes, in the parish itself. So it was great to be here. It was an excuse to get out of the seminary for a couple days a week, or weekends, to come to the parish itself. Even though at the beginning we were setting up in a couple of high school and a grade school nearby in the area for the Sunday worship services, put up chairs and put up altars, and meeting the folks and encouraging them and asking them to come for different programs.
That's got to be tough, going up, knocking on a door and saying we're starting a new church. And what was that experience like?
Well, I think I doubt if I ever did it by myself. We probably went together with one of the other guys just to talk to the people, and people were very receptive for the most part, and they just were interested in when is the meeting and how can we get to know more about the church and how can we get to know the pastor better.
Okay, from your point of view, you got these young people here to help you out. Mm-hmm. What's going through your mind of what needs to be done to get a parish started?
Well, there are certain things that are given, like you have worship. But that's big. That's very important. So you had to get together a choir, start to invite people to form a choir and to sing at the masses, both at the high school, Schaumburg High School, and at the grammar school in northern Hoffman. And so that was one thing. And then the other thing is religious ed. So we had to get someone from the community to volunteer. So we had Mary Lee Halpin, who was an educator, but not a religious educator, but she was very bright, and she was trained in education and was a teacher. So she was able to get a group of men and women to instruct the children. And I think at first we had them over at St. Hubert's, but eventually we rented the high school, and we had the classes in the high school. The grammar school. And so that was where at Hoover Grammar School. So and that worked out very, very well for a number of years, for many years. And then we had people who came to help Mary Lee form the program, like Sister Marilyn Kofer, who was a qualified religious educator, and she helped out. And then other people came in, and everybody added to it. So that was another thing. And then we had to start to think of things like confirmation programs. So we started to develop a confirmation program. And then from the very beginning, my focus was on adult formation. So from the very beginning, we started with sometimes just maybe 3, 4, 5 people, but talking about the theology of church. And then eventually we branched out, and I can't recall really time frames, but eventually we branched out, and we got large numbers of people coming to sessions on the scriptures, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And then in the course of time, we had a program called Adult Formation for adults, and we hired pros to come in the various aspects of church teaching, liturgy, history, all the areas of the church, and we had large numbers of people come involve themselves over a long period of time. But as I say, I can't recall exactly the time frame. But that was the focus that I had, was adult formation. And other people would be focused on children, but I was on adults.
Well, but another thing that, as I recall back in the early days, there were a lot of young people out here with growing families, and social activities become important to keep the families together. And you started a lot of different, there were athletic leagues and other social aspects of it too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we realized that people had a lot of different needs across the board. So we did have a lot of social events that took place. I can't recall them all now, but we had different kind of programs, and we used the original building. This was not the original building, but the original building for that. And we did one of the seminarians at that time who came to help us was Greg Sakowitz, and he started a program for sports with kids and adults across the board, men and women, and it was baseball and what else? Volleyball, basketball. Yeah, so it was across the board kind of the programming. It wasn't just religion, it was across the board.
Now, as you went on to your other assignments, did you find that some of the things that you did here helped you?
Huge, very much so. Part of the program here was having a program over at the hospital, Lexington Brothers Hospital, to learn about care ministry. Father Dick Tessner was the person that helped with that for myself, and just to have some of the folks who were care ministers helping me to learn what it's like to go into a hospital room to care for and minister to somebody who was there. Those kinds of things, and then all the other things that George was talking about, calling people together to search for faith, to dig into the theology of church, but what does it mean living it in the parish itself, and having people be involved. A lot of what the council was calling for, having people take on roles, not only in liturgy, but also strong roles within the parish itself, and many things.
Now, I know that that was a unique time. Cardinal Cody happened to be the cardinal at the time, and he had his quirks as far as to what a building should be and what a church should be. And how did you go about designing the first church? Because one of the titles of this place was a Pizza Hut. So tell us how you went about designing the first building that was here.
Well, really, it was pushed upon us by downtown. It was not the kind of building that I wanted, but I had so many other things going on that eventually I caved in, and they put that first building up. But as a matter of fact, it turned out quite well, because we used it for worship, and we used it as a meeting place. So there were all kinds of meetings. Like one of the meetings that we had, sort of a story, was the Equal Rights Amendment was big at that time. And we had, the building was the women of Schaumburg got together and did this. And we had this big meeting of people, women, who were pushing for equal rights. So one of the things about this parish and other parishes as well is that that social justice is a big component of our faith. This is not just an addendum, but social justice is central to what the mission of Jesus is. And so this parish has always been very open to programs and to understandings about the teaching of our church regarding social justice. That was important. The other thing I might mention about the seminarians is that they weren't here just to do things. It was important that they reflected upon what it meant to them. And so I would meet with the seminarians, each of them, every week or every 2 weeks, I forget now, but we would go over what it meant to them. What were you doing? What did it mean to you? How do you see this part of your future? What does it mean to you as a person of faith? So always we're trying to look at the big picture, because we don't want it just to be something they did, but something that meant something to them, so that they would continue on in ministry with excitement and fervor and a deep sense that what they were doing was significant. So that was important.
Now, you brought up social justice, and I know this parish has a significant Hispanic population, and that's got to be tough because you have a number of people in that population that don't speak English. A number of them and their children, for the most part, do speak English. What got that group to start to intermix and work together as one parish?
Well, really, it started with we had a significant number of not a significant number, a small number of Spanish-speaking people here, and I remember having a mass sometime around it started in 72, or sometime around 76, and there was a couple in the parish that were involved, Sylvia and Leo Cancio, and they were from Cuba. So I had this mass, and I was presiding at it, and we only had a handful of Spanish people there. And so I said, well, Leo, how did I do? He says, George, you got a lot of guts. So the Spanish wasn't very good. But in the course of time then, there were a lot of people in surrounding communities, larger numbers of Hispanic people, and they weren't being provided for. They weren't being cared for. And so one of the people in our parish, what was her name? Can't think of her name right now. It slips my mind. But anyhow, pardon me? But anyhow, they mentioned the possibility of having a mass in Spanish. So we started to have a mass in Spanish at 1:30. I forget. We hired someone to come in and do the mass. And then as the time came on, more and more people came because they were welcomed. And so that's still the same. That's still the truth. Most of the people come here are not living within the boundaries of the Holy Spirit Parish. They come from outside because they were welcomed by the people and by the staff. So we had to deal with that, and but we didn't make this decision just by ourselves. We had a parish council, and the parish council eventuated in the course of time. At first, we had many models that were given us from downtown, and they were all really imperfect, terribly. But eventually, we had 30 to 40 people meeting 5 times a year. And so they made the decision, yes, to welcome them. And so, but we were reminded that when we did this, remember, they're going to be making demands upon the use of the facilities and time. And we said, well, okay, that's the way it is. And that's the way it has been.
But you also had a Filipino community at one. That it's less now, but that was a fairly big portion of the community at one point too.
Well, I don't think it was a big portion. No, but we had a segment of them, and we had the things in Gabi, which we'll be celebrating in December. And so, but everybody's welcome. I think the theme of our parish is the opening song that we have so frequently. All are welcome in this place. And that's been the theme of the parish from the time it began and continuing to the present. So that, and even in the song, that is the thing that sort of marks about our self-identity.
Now, you mentioned earlier in the program that as long as you work with the community and and you're working with them, because at times downtown wants certain things to be happening, and sometimes that it works easily, and sometimes it's more difficult. How do you deal with all those issues too, and keep the community vibrant?
Well, the best frame is we say stay under the radar. Just don't push the button too much, but push it a little bit, and with the people. As long as you're with the people and they're with you, things work out okay. As long as you're not someone trying to disrupt things. But if you're trying to just minister to the community with the needs of the community, and then having programs that connect with that, they leave you alone. Downtown isn't that abrasive. We have the little things every once in a while, but not too frequently.
You finally did get a basement when finally they realized that we're not New Orleans, right?
Well, yeah, when you got a new cardinal, yeah.
And you got a new building.
And we got a new building, this one. Right. But this was built on the tops of the other one. The other one was ready to fall down. It was really poorly built, poorly constructed. But I have to give credit to the people who designed this building, because it was a difficult job. They had to make sure that it had some height to it and some beauty to it. And so the people who did this, it wasn't me. I never even came in here to look at this building, because we had people who really knew what they were doing.
These are people in the parish.
Some in the parish, and some, one was Claude Hansel, he was in the parish, and Sister Marilyn Kofler, and then the architect, and then Nelson. And so we had people who were pros, and they were able to redesign the building so that it has some beauty to it. Of course, it's our building, so I love it and think it's great.
Well, it's very practical in the fact that we do use it for a variety of purposes. Now, you were here for 20-some years, right? And then you had to break off again. What was that like, and going to another parish and watching the thing that you had developed have to sustain itself?
Well, really, I was supposed to leave after 14 years. I was 60 years old, and Cardinal Bernardine called me down and told me I was going to move. So I said, I don't think it's a good idea. So then he said, well, go and make a retreat and talk it over with the priest, and then come to see me. So I did. Talked it over with the priest, all the ins and outs of what we were doing and the response of the people. So he called me in. He said, now, what do you think? I said, I think I should stay. So he said, well, I think you should go. So I said, well, I'm not going to cut my wrist if you move me. So wherever you go, I'll go. But then he thought it over. And on Christmas Eve of 1986, Christmas Eve of 1986, he called me up and told me that I was to stay. But he said, remember to take care of that debt you have. So I was happy about that. So I was able to stay here until I reached the age of 70 in 1996. And then when the new priest came, I didn't want to intrude on him, and so I had a good friend, Pat Brennan at Holy Family, and Dawn Mayer, a good friend of mine who worked with me here, And she was at Holy Family too. So I really became almost like an associate at Holy Family. And I was there for more than 10 years. Yeah, so that worked out really well. It worked out well for me because Pat and I got along so well, and I was able to do the things that I think I do well. I'm basically a teacher. And so I was able to have all kinds of different classes, continuing education programs, especially on Scripture and the theology of church, the history of the church, Vatican II. It was very fulfilling.
And it's my understanding, again, Father George is 93 years old, and you still participate in some of that teaching by being here and giving your homilies, but you also are on a radio show, right?
Oh, yeah. Dawn Mayer and I have a radio show. We tape it on Tuesday night or Wednesday morning, and then the show is on Sunday morning at 6:30, station W 560, and then at 11 o'clock, 1160. On the AM station. So it's on the Scriptures. We just reflect upon the gospel. We don't prepare it together. We prepare it separately, but then we come and have the taping, and we just show how we reflect on the gospel, mostly on the Gospels.
Now, we've covered a lot of territory in a fairly short amount of time here. Is there anything that you would like us to know about that we haven't talked about?
Well, I think the idea is that the community of faith has its challenges, its sorrows, its defects, and it has its strengths and its joys, and it makes a difference in the lives of people. And so it's been a privilege, really, to be part of this community, and especially, it's been a privilege that I was able to continue on until I was 70. That was a great gift. And then I was continue on afterwards so that the relationships continue. But the most important thing is to see that somehow the work goes on, the mission goes on, and the mission will go on.